welcome to another episode of Talk That Get Results. I'm Everett Weber Herbert, and as per usual, we're here every Tuesday evening with something that at least we think is of community interest and or of some concern. And if you think that you have something which fits into that category, you'd like to find out how you can be a part of the program, well, why don't you drop us a line? Address it to Let's Talk Program in Care of Vaughan Radio, P.O. Box 195, Charlestown in Nevis. So give us a call. Our numbers are 1-869-469-1616 and or 1700. And by the way, those will be the numbers you'll use to be a part of this evening's discussion. Again, thank you all very much for joining us. This is your voice in the community, Talk That Get Results. With regard to your participation in the show, we encourage you to call in on the numbers listed, 1-869-469-1616 and or 1700. Here's a suggestion. You have a question or a comment, perhaps you can get a pencil, piece of paper, write it down so that you're well organized. And when you get in on the show, you take as little time as possible so we can accommodate as many of you as we can. We ask only, first of all, you respect yourselves and then respect others, because we will not accept anything we deem not within our broadcast standards. Again, thank you all for joining us. This is your voice in the community, Talk That Get Results. You can also follow us on our webpage and www.vaughanradio.com. Click the streaming live video or just audio. Also, you can follow us on our Facebook page at Vaughan Radio, and you get the video stream live, and you can follow us on YouTube. You click subscribe, click on the Vaughan Radio, and you have us live. Thank you all again. Tonight, he's back. You could call him the comeback kid. Ted Hobson, good evening.
Good evening, Weber, and good evening to my fellow panelists. And it's really a joy and a pleasure to be back on this program. I have not been well. I had a fall, the kind of fall you get from being in a slippery bathtub in Washington, and you know, I had damaged my right leg, but I'm on the mend now, and I'm happy to be back and to take part in this program. It's always been a joy and a pleasure to share this table and this panel with wonderful people. They have now become my close friends. I don't know if they regard me as their friend, but they are my friends. And I enjoy talking to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis and Nevisians and Kittitians around the world. And so, you know, I'm pleased to be back, Webo.
And it's so good to have you back. Dr. Patricia Bartlett, good evening.
Good evening, Webo. Good evening to my fellow panelists, and in particular, Mr. Hobson. It's a joy to have Mr. Hobson back. I know he has been on what it seems like a sabbatical for quite a while, and I'm hoping that tonight he'll be able to at least in part, you know, some of what he would have learned on the time away from here. We have gotten some feedback through him about this show, and we're always pleased, you know, whether it's negative or positive, we welcome, you know, feedback so that we can adjust accordingly. Webo, if I may, I would just like to say good evening to Carl. I understand he's back. St. Martin Carl, good night, Carl. My friends in the US and BVI, and of course, my friends in the diaspora, the wider diaspora, my diasporian friends. It's a little earlier, Webo, so my husband is not going to break the time limit tonight. He's going to go to bed at a reasonable time now. So I'm glad to have him in our company, and good evening to all the folks who are listening this evening.
Conrad Nye-Liebert, good evening.
Good evening, Webo, and good evening to my colleagues around the table, to your hard-working staff here at Vaughan Radio, and to everyone who's in tune to this program by the various means. A pleasant good evening. Webo, once again we gather to discuss the issues affecting the people on this wonderful program which goes by the name Talk That Get Results, Webo, and we do hope in our indulgence we can arrive at some conclusion and bring forth some results to the situations which we sometimes tackle here around this table. Webo, the last week program, I've gotten quite a lot of feedback on that. I was very happy, and just to be reminded as to how many people is in tune, how many people have opinion, and also how many people are afraid to call because of, well, they're thinking, oh, everybody knows my voice. But I'm encouraging the people out there to free up now. It's time to be free. It's time to contribute. It's an election season we're in, and of course, this is evaluation time. This is exams time. Of course, it's been almost 4 or 5 years, so it's time really to make a judgment once again, and we look forward to that, Webo. I'm happy to be here. I'm so grateful that you invite me. Once again, Webo, as we embark into this journey of hopefully a healthy conversation tonight, Webo. Thank you so much.
The Honorable Spencer Brand, good evening.
Good evening, Webo, and good evening to my colleagues around the table. Let me say a very special good evening to our listeners here in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis and further afield, certainly those who are viewing this program at this time. I want to say to those family who are feeling a bit down tonight for the loss of a loved one, I want to take this opportunity to offer my condolences to those who are in our various hospitals here in St. Kitts and Nevis and to those who are seeking medical attention overseas. I hope that they will soon be up and about. I want to say to those who are celebrating tonight or this week, birthday, wedding anniversary, or some accomplishment in their life, I want to pause and say extra special greetings to my son who turned 16 on the 21st. He's getting up there in age, so I want to certainly wish him well as he grows. It is indeed a pleasure for me to be here once again, and thank you so much for the invitation.
Edric W. Stanley, good evening.
Good evening, Webo, and good evening to my fellow panelists. Good evening to the people of St. Kitts, and again, more particularly, the gracious people of Nevis, those who will be listening to us on the World Wide Web and throughout the Caribbean Basin. And now we've got the other medium, or media, Facebook and YouTube. They have an opportunity to view us, read our body language, and even to determine as to whether or not we're disseminating truthful information which would guide them upward and onward, and to make them a better person and keep them informed as to where we are, who we are within St. Kitts and Nevis. And of course, we use this program to propel Nevis and its peoples forward. Today I was privileged to be at a meeting with one of the most brilliant men in the world, our Premier, the Honorable Mark Brantley. And some who may not have gotten close enough to him to understand the level of his intellect. I was so delighted when people threw a couple of bombs at him and he was able to bat them just like the great Brian Lara, pushing one which they thought would have clean bowled him, but went over the boundary. So I must say that the meeting went well, and those of us who attended, I think, learned a lot. Information, sometimes we don't get all that information, but being at the head of the pyramid, or top of the pyramid, he gets all the information, or most of the information. It's like the captain on a ship, and he's on the bridge, and he sees all the boisterous waves coming at the ship, and he must be able to understand how to navigate and ultimately bring the ship ashore. Well, I must say that last week we had some people on from the bank, CIBC, and they spoke about health and the walk. And of course, I was somewhat surprised that maybe another or two panelists could have been here. Should have been at the walk, but I decided to take on that challenge. Mm-hmm. I do not like to walk. Let me put it straightforwardly. I have looked after my animals as a kid, ran from Charlestown to Church Ground, non-stop. And when I see people jogging, I said, boy, I should have had the opportunity to give them some sheep and goat and cattle to look after when they were young. And thus I feel for some reason that I would take part, but just to test the challenge. And of course I walked from the old cemetery close to the Hunkins Drive up to the bypass way and came around. Of course, there was quite a large gathering. Everybody walked. I mean, I came in about maybe 200 feet behind the last persons, and I could have run to, in fact, get there before them as a strategic and tactical point. But I said, no, let me just continue at the same pace I was going, and ultimately I arrived. Of course, I understood they were giving out presents to the oldest person who participated. Well, I'm glad I wasn't there at the time when they gave out the present, because I would not have accepted it. And ultimately, somebody has got it. But they were surprised when I actually walked in and not being brought in by the Red Cross bus. But like I said, I must say that I owe this to the Garden of Eden, which I kept talking about in Nevis. And I'm hoping that the Health Promotion Unit and other people who are involved in health can organize something with a group. And all these people who are walking, bring them in groups, get some of the herbalists who go to the mountain all the time. And with those groups, show them all the vital stuff we've got in our Garden of Eden. That would keep them slim and trim and healthy. And hence, when a challenge of a walk like this is, they're confronted with a challenge of a walk like this, would not hesitate to take it on. And I took it on, and like I said, I was able to complete the walk. Deep thinking. Sometimes people are being accused of not being a deep thinker, but anybody who thinks and anybody who writes, and I've written 9 poems and I've got 9 more to put into that booklet. And I have a book to write. It's just that I've been so busy. But I take no advice from certain quarters. I do write, and I do think, and I do think deeply. And hence, I share some of my writings with certain people. I gave a doctor friend a book, and he gave it to his daughter, who is a straight-A student at one of the universities in the United States. He said, sure, this is deep stuff. So I take no directive from certain quarters. I must go on to say that I love what's happening at our entrance to Brownhill. Brownhill has been such a great part of my upbringing. And the road is coming to a head and demonstrates clearly that Nevis is moving in leaps and bounds, in my view. I wish China Nisbet, right there at the entrance, still alive, but she's gone, great history, gone to the great beyond. But all those people who lived in Brownhill, Annie Bartlett, and others, would have seen Brownhill make a massive transformation from then to now. And as a result, we look like a modern society when you travel through Brownhill, when you travel through Hanley's Road, when you travel up to Rollins, through Braziers. That road going up to Mount Nevis. And Nevis is moving again, like I said, in leaps and bounds. And I am saying this with the amplification that those people on the outside who were born here can come and see what they've left behind. And those who have not yet arrived to see exactly where we are as that little island. And sure, those who named it the Queen of the Caribbees, they were so right. They were so right. we have some old business from last week, Webber, and I said, unfortunately, our lady panelist, she ran out the clock, and as a result, I didn't get a word in edgewise in that regard, and therefore, I am attempting to say again, when I sit here and hear things that are not forthright and truthful on a ship that I helped to construct, and it has been sailing around the globe, however you want to put that metaphor, it has carried its payload. And we who actually made the sacrifice, the commitment to keep the ship afloat, must always attempt to defend it. And if I sit here and recognize something of a falsehood coming to the fore through these mic, I have to utter what I know is the truth. And in that regard, we have a certain level of intellect, all of us around this table, and we have the opportunity to do our research and to get it right. Let me repeat, get it right. And as I saw the agitation for weeks, maybe 2 weeks prior to this information being thrust into the public domain, fortunately the Honorable Spencer Brand was here, who was the face that represented, and ultimately the yoke was hung on his neck. But he brought the information to the fore, and with that information, I was able to now understand what the agitation was to bring this information to the fore. But it is simple. You get this information, and there are areas that you can do. You can go and get the information correct and get it right. The registry is there. They handle these papers, and they give you the right information because it is guided by law. And in that regard, those who, in fact, are attempting to propel a story with much falsehood, let me label it hogwash. I do not know if you understand what hogwash means, Weber, but there are times when, in the older days, when we raised pigs, and you put some water into that pot and you give it to the pig bubbles in it to ensure that it has something in there, and if it doesn't have anything in there, it's just hogwash. And therefore, I said that the political dump basket, which you may have now come familiar with, and people ask me about the term, it's a phrase coined by me, maybe as a deep thinker, but that was a political dung basket in which hogwash was placed. And I'm saying now that when we look at all the dynamics with that issue, it was very simple. You go to the registry, you get the right information. But how come I took it on the first time we heard it? That was a Tuesday night. And the Wednesday night, the Honorable Mark Brantley took it on. And last Tuesday, in your documentary, you brought it again to the fore. So there are three of us who actually brought it to the fore, including our good lady and, of course, her associate, which I said, stand on your own 2 feet and don't allow yourself to be dragged down a rat hole, because when the truth comes to the fore, that rat hole is going to be closed with the truth, and you can't get out. But the whole rancor last week, which made the show rather boisterous, but enjoyable to some, Naya was agitated. And that was the question asked of me last week. What happened to you and Naya? And I said, well, Naya had his peace, but at the same time, I said to him, get it right. Get it right. Get it right. As Myers would always admonish us, keep the show at a certain level of audibility. So if the station wants to use part of it as part of its newscast, then at least the audibility would be more clear. And in that regard, I didn't really go after Naya when he kept talking with his falsehoods. I said, just get it right. Low-keyed, get it right. Get it right. But what I'm saying to you is that when you hear a story, something like that, there are areas for you to trust, but verify. And if we have a certain level of intellect to verify, why don't we use that same intellect to try and verify and get it right? And like I've said, based on that issue that was brought into the public domain, it wasn't designed to just put it out there. It was designed to do damage. And I'm not going to allow anybody to insult my intelligence by telling me, oh, it's filled with sarcasm, and that is not the worth, that house didn't worth a thing. No, those people who do not even understand the meaning of the word sarcasm will be misled. So they must be told the truth. And if you don't have the aptitude to figure out the value of the house, nor the value of the 16 acres, then ask those who know. And I'm saying to you, there are sources of knowing. And come to the fountain. And the fountain would, if you beat it, you might be able to get something from the fountain. But it's a valuable property, and the government can't lose. And if you state that the only agency that's supposed to be buying, I ask the question again, and I need an answer in an audible fashion so that people can be guided by that answer. Is the Department of Agriculture the only agency in government constitutionally authorized to purchase land? I'm not fully aware, but I don't think the Department of Agriculture is the only agency in government with the constitutional authority to buy land. And if it is, and it only needs an acre, 2 acres, small quantity, and then the additional 14 or 15 acres left, and who rules the roost with reference to the remainder? So if another agency buys it, and it is propelled that it should have been bought by the Agriculture Department, then I think the information was designed to do damage. And only fools who would not understand would believe that it was not designed to do damage. So I'm saying, when we are here, I don't come here to do damage to anybody. My mission is to disseminate information for people to be enlightened, or by which our people could be enlightened. And as a result, I listen very keenly. And when somebody, in fact, is bringing something to the fore, with my analytical skills, I would make a determination as to whether or not it is designed to do damage. And it was clearly designed to do damage. And as a result, I could not sit idly by, nor silently, and not challenge it in a vehement way. It may have rubbed some people the wrong way based on the terms I used and the way I said, but it was just to bring to the attention those of our listeners who for many years listen to this show, and they are guided by this show. And many of them are the followers of the Let's Talk program, Vaughan Radio, and not even the analysts or panelists. They are Vaughan Radio's people. I don't call their names. I meet all of them. When I say all of them, those within our local areas. And for years before other panelists came on, I'm certain Ted would tell you, they would have stopped him and said, and those of us who carried the show for so many years, we know who they are. We don't lay claim to them. Webo, let's keep the show with truth and forthrightness. And let's keep it on an even keel. And let's sail it for another 31 years into victorious waters, leading our people upward and onward as a community. God bless Von Radio. God bless you, Webo.
Amen.
I have some more to put on the table, but I'll stop
That
there.
was long. That was very long, Mr. Stanley. It was
Wow.
this is the introductory remarks. It's run almost a half an hour. But I think,
We're still in the
Webo,
introductory.
you know,
Are we still in the
Webo,
introductory?
huh?
What am I missing? I was off on a lot.
They miss what
You know,
I didn't hear last week, but I got, as I said, I got a number of telephone calls. You know.
well, obviously Stanley's not a guy who likes to take last lick, as we sometimes refer to it as kids. You know, he's not going to take the last lick, so he's going to come back the next day and the next week and punch again. But I would simply like to say this, Mr. Stanley, that I find that you're so consumed by your own indignation that you fail to realize the real issue that prompted this conversation, the issue that brought this conversation to this table by Dr. Bartlett and myself, really. I am also disappointed in the remarks of the Premier when he said words to the effect that he feels a bit vexed or upset because we make it feel like, or we make it sound like he doesn't have a home. I find that was a low blow, really, coming from the Premier, because this is a public matter, and of course the public have a right to question it. It was an opportune time to set the record straight, and you did. But how could you ever think that we're here thinking that you doesn't have a home? You know, that's a low blow, and I'm disappointed to a great extent, you know, when that remarks cast, because we're intelligent people and we're members of the public, we are taxpayers, it's our money, so we ask about it. The real issue that brought, from my point of view, this issue to the forefront, Webo, is the question of priority. It's not whether or not there is a good deal and whether they should act on it. The question is, I mean, should we prioritize that? You know, yes, there's an issue about extending the, finding more lands for the cemetery, and they said the deal was so good, so they buy everything. But it's still a matter of priority, you know, and I sat home just the other day and I say, you know, just a simple example as you know, for a family that eats, say, bread and lemonade, you know, and of course bread fall in price, so you go spend all the money on bread and then you don't have no lemonade to drink with it. I find this is an issue of priority, finding the balance in public expenditure and making sure that important facilities, say at the exam, I mean, there's so much unfinished things done in Nevis. We look at Newcastle Airport, we look at the Mondo track, we look at the hospital. And so, as a member of the public, it would, of course, concern me when, you know, purchases are made by the government, and that really caused me to wonder, is that priority? Shouldn't we? But again, I don't know how things are done really in government as to what money spent there. But I see a lot of unfinished symphony, a lot of unfinished projects. So basically, Webo, this issue, from my point of view, was brought to the forefront when we are dealing with the concept of priority. And I just wanted Mr. Stanley to know that it's not a thing about carrying anything for anybody. I don't talk to, I mean, if you know me well, I'm a man who think by myself. And Mr. Stanley, sometimes it's a bit pushy for you to always feel like you're the only one that spell right around this table. We're all intelligent people, and sometimes I want to ask you what school you went to, because we all went to higher education. And for you to feel like you and only you supposed to evaluate what is right and what is wrong, that is belittling to our intelligence. And as I see you as a man from church ground, a businessman, a Nevision, I respect you on that level. I really don't know much more about you and your background, your studies, and so forth. So, and I ask that you respect me too, because I got that respect for you. But you seems to be not aware when you're passing remarks that really affronts people. And that doesn't, if we all act like that that way in a society, what kind of society that would be? Why do you feel you have superior intelligence around this table? Where do you get that from?
Well, now let me say this. The first person who mentioned about a home for the Premier was mentioned here before the Wednesday night show. I don't know if your memory is serving you correctly, so check it. And therefore, I think the Premier had all right to inject into it that he had a home. Because you are trying to justify your statement, and I know that was not the purpose.
No.
The purpose was to bring
that from a Premier.
I am saying to you that the information regarding the home of a Premier
I cannot accept that
was
from the
mentioned
Premier.
here, and if you are going to write a story, you choose certain headings from which you're going to proceed.
It's belittling.
And that was mentioned quite poignantly.
That's a low blow.
Are you saying that?
That's a low blow.
Are you saying that
To the level of
it
conversation.
was not mentioned that it's going to be a Premier's house, or it was bandied about that it was going to be a Premier?
It's going to be a house
So here
for the Premier or not.
I'm just
we
saying-
wasn't questioning whether or not
No.
Mark Brantley has a house.
No.
And I say
No.
he talking about that. It's a low blow in the conversation.
No, I'm saying to you that it was brought to the fore. So if your memory doesn't serve you correctly, please re-evaluate. Please go back and analyze what was said. And as I said, if you're going to write a story, you would listen, or you would put down all your headings. And those of us who had higher education, we know exactly how to write a story. And in that regard, the story was written. The story was said, it was brought to the fore. But I know it was a red herring. You guys brought it to the public domain to say that this money that was expended was exorbitant, and it was spent on a house that needed to be repaired, and it was spent in the time when there are other priorities, not understanding that some people are poor and will remain poor because they lack to grasp opportunity when it becomes available. Some people think that it is luck. And therefore, something of this magnitude with such high value in terms of profit, it was a good decision, and it was a steal. And you are going to tell me that people of knowledge, with reference to the subject matter, must not grab that opportunity and buy it for its people? Because that extra land, Mr. Brand worked out the price here. I think he was a little off with his numbers. You do the math again, it's less than that. It's less than that. Do the math. I haven't done the math since I left here that night, but at the same time, we'll leave it at that. Let's not do the math. I'm just saying to you that you put people to lead and to make decisions. Sometimes we have hard choices. And I know that Naya knew that the reason that was brought to the public domain was not to question as a citizen the decisions made by the cabinet, as the case might be. They thought they had something where the money was spent on a particular item. It was costly and it was untimely. And in that regard, it was supposed to be a political bombshell. But it couldn't work because there are people here who are guarding truth and ensure that the truth is disseminated.
But you're assuming, man.
Not assuming, it's factual.
You're assuming.
Because if you're going to bring something that is not factual,
I didn't claim I was bringing any facts. I was talking about...
You don't do that here on Van. We try to set a boat that
We're
that
members
would
of
carry.
the public, sir, and we have a right to ask a question about government
You
spending,
can ask a
government
question, but what I'm
exercise.
saying to you, you can ask a question, but don't try to fool me. Maybe you're fooling yourself. But you can't fool everybody. They say you can fool some people sometimes, but you can't fool all the people all the time. And I'm just saying that you know, if it had been the way you had it figured out, it would have been a political bombshell. But it couldn't be, because I know the value of the property. And other people in the public who met me and asked me and spoke about it knew that it was a steal. A gentleman called in that same night and mentioned, based on what he heard, from New York. He's a Nivision. And he said it was a steal. So this tells you that he would have agreed with the cabinet for having made such a decision, because he's in the industry. There are people who may not be in the industry, but at the same time are looking for land, price per acre, at which the government bought. But can they get it? The only place you can get a piece of land that is less than what's in the public domain or in the private sector is from government. So if government buys it at a steal, the government can't take it with it. It's there for its citizens. And like I said, you can fool yourself with that issue, but you can't fool me. And I'm here to guard the truth. And once you come up with falsehoods, I am telling you to get it right. Get it right. And I'll leave it there, Weber.
Okay. Now, you said last week you didn't get enough time. Did you get enough time tonight?
Weber, we've got
More
a
than
night ahead of us, and we've
No,
got
you said last week.
four other speakers.
You said last week you did not get enough time to finish up something, right?
No, well,
I'm asking you if you got enough time now.
well, let's go on, Weber. We will see what transpires, because, like I said, the clock ran out, or dear lady ran out the clock. And, you know, there are times when people are wise enough to run out the clock.
So you haven't gotten enough time yet.
Well, let's carry the show
So
on
you
and
had
see
enough
how we-
time.
I've got a few other things to put in. So let's go forward with our show, Weber.
Oh, go ahead with the other stuff you have to put on the table.
My son called me on Sunday and said, let's go by Bede, because Bede is no longer contracted to do water.
Yeah, before you go on, though, you know, let me just say that it is important in terms of when you approach and solve problems, because as I listen this particular issue, it is reminding me of the current impeachment of President Trump, because as you listen to the debate, you think that you're discussing one particular issue, and then it just comes in and adds and adds and adds and so on. When we started with this issue, and as far as I'm concerned, it looked like it's about 10 different issues, but it appeared, and it was, in my view, a very simple issue. There seemed to be a debate or concern that the government had bought some land under a certain pretense. And so Mr. Brand was here, and Mr. Brand was challenged to give the reason why the government bought the land. And Mr. Brand gave the reason. He said he didn't have all the facts, came back, checked it out, and he came and he gave the reason. And having done that, I said, well, if anybody else has any other information or evidence to the contrary, they must bring it and defend it as Mr. Brand is prepared to bring his evidence and defend it. To my knowledge, nobody else did. So I said, let's move on. Because you'll end up with a never-ending argument or debate if people just pull things out of the sky and say it. And that is why I said I was moving on from that until and unless someone brings some other evidence and is prepared to defend it. That was that issue. The other issue was a gentleman who was speaking about the airport saga. And I invited him presumptuously to call the Premier. And he invited me to listen. And I got to tell you, the gentleman when he called, he sounded statesman-like. Good evening, Mr. Mark Brantley. He has become my friend, the gentleman. And Mr. Brantley gave him the explanation, and I played the clip. At the end of it, he called back and he said he was satisfied. But prior to that, I learned and I understand that for months, the issue was being bandied about on different media houses and so on and so forth. So I was pointing out how we deal with issues. So I've allowed the thing to go on and on. But this is what it is. Mr. Brand has presented the reason. The Premier has addressed it and we played it here. If anyone has contradictory information or evidence, let's bring it and let's discuss it. Other than that, it will be a never-ending story.
If people got nefarious intent.
You ever heard the quotation from a great English philosopher? The essence of genius is to know what to overlook. I've had a lot of people have contacted me, even today, because it seemed like it was a real interesting issue and the way it was dealt with. And I talked to a lot of people who perhaps they're not fans of the Premier, and perhaps who had heard the allegations as well. But after it was dealt with, one person told me today, I had believed what they were saying,
Thought that get results.
And they were not a fan, they're not fans of the Premier. But when we address the issue, they still may not be a fan of the Premier, but they no longer believe the allegation. And that is what I think that we should aim for, because if for no other reason, when the lies are being told about and against you, then you will begin to understand how it feels. Injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. And if you can't address injustice and call it what it is when you are not involved, you'll be sorry that you didn't, because when your turn comes, you'll understand how it feels. So we have never been a fan of things like those. Let's bring the facts that you have, and then it fall where it may. The issue, to me, has been dealt with until and unless evidence to the contrary comes.
We're about talk that gets results. I thought that we had already dealt with it last week, and all the information that I would have had, I would have shared the information I had. I shared my perspective. I shared my concern. I got answers. Like I said last week, I wasn't particularly, satisfied with the kind of answers I got, but I took the answers that I got, and that's just it. And you see where it leads from here. And I'm just so glad that I'm a part of Talk That Gets Results, and that's all I'll say.
But again, like I said, that's the normal run of things, because I've dealt with a lot of issues like these over the years, right? So I understand how it is. And it doesn't surprise me. And that is why you have to be cautious when you get certain information. That is why it's not that I don't trust people, but if you notice, as you said, you have a letter and you read in it that said, "Can I see it?" I didn't distrust you, but I just wanted to see it so that I can say with confidence, I saw it. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So that is just the way we go about doing things. As I said, if you don't like Mr. Brand, you don't like Mr. Stanley, you don't like me, or you don't. But the question is he correct? You know what I'm saying? Is it correct? Because up to now, nobody is claiming. Nobody is claiming the other allegation. Mr. Brand is standing behind what he said. The other allegation on usage, nobody is claiming it. And that is why I said I didn't want to address it, because nobody's going to throw anything, you pick it up, and then, because somebody said there's a particular source for the allegation, and I know they were listening. I know they were listening, but and laughing too.
And they
Okay,
the
so
the young basket, the political young
but
basket.
I don't know.
Come back with that
I
again,
don't know
Stanley. I thought
about
we did
that.
that last week. Didn't we do
Right?
that last week? I just thought we did. Sometimes people just don't behave as mature as you would expect.
No,
I thought we had already
Dr.
done
Bad,
that.
how I would deal with that. As I said, I have a lot of experience with it. There were two gentlemen years ago. The late Dr. Simeon Daniel and Hastings R. Daniel. Hastings at the time was a member of the panel, and they had an ongoing feud. And I gave them a lot of time, back and forth. And when I thought that we had enough, I said, that's it. And I remember, we have it on tape. Dr. Daniel, he called in on the phone and he said, "It's okay, Mr. Herbert, thank you very much. That will hold him for a while." Because he felt that he had, and then Hastings was on the program. Hastings was satisfied as well that he had made his case, and we ended it there. So, that dissertation that we allowed a little while ago, until everybody was exhausted, finito.
And that's a good word. Exhausted.
Good evening. Please call back. Okay. Now, Ted.
Yes, sir.
Anybody else has anything that they would like to introduce?
I was just saying that BEAD is no longer contracted with government to supply water, and as a result, the equipment that they've got is there to be purchased. And if you can go there, well, they've got a lot of mechanical.
You speaking on behalf of them?
No, Webo. I'm just saying. I'm leading up to when you see a deal.
No, but you have. They gave you the information.
I'm saying this more or less to, if I was there as a potential buyer, and there are people in the community who would, I'm certain, like some of those tools. and not to give them any advertising for free, but at the same time to disseminate some information.
Okay, let me just
Yes.
take this. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Herbert, and to your panel. This 22 years ago, around there, we just wanted to secede from Sinkit. 22 years later, some of the same people who wanted to secede is working in Sinkit in the federal government. Is that a coincidence? I just wonder. Mr. Stanley, there was an issue with the Paradise judgment, with the Paradise Bathland of the Beach. And I would like to ask Mr. Stanley what he meant when he said that the government should change the law. If the law has been breached, a judgment has been given. I could recall a statement I made in back when I was speaking for independence. Mr. Herbert, you could remember it. How could we move forward when we are not going anywhere? Look at us, 22 years later. I could recall the issue when Mr. Herbert played some recording of the Premier when the issue of the airport came up. And when the Premier was asked about it in his press conference, the statement was made that this thing was going on for years, the discussion. And I asked myself, what is these assets? Who does it belong to? The state, the Premier, the people? How can we discuss things that having to do with taxpayers' money? And the state keep the discussion private and then has documents signed to say non-disclosure. So then, what are they hiding from the people? These things are the people. The airport belongs to the citizens, not the government. The government is in trust for the people, but they don't get up and do with their tax money as if it's theirs. The government use the taxes of the people to fight the people. Because if the people take the government to court, they will use the taxes. So you have the government using the taxes of the people to pauperize the people. This is not democracy. If the government breaks the law, they should use their own money. Not the taxpayers' money when they knowingly, they know that they are breaking the law. It's not that they don't know, Mr. Herbert. These issues was discussed. I want to ask the leaders of Nevis, can your words be trusted? Years from now, if it's found out that what is being said tonight is not true, what are the repercussions? You just elect them again? And that's the examples for our children? That people whose words cannot be trusted are chosen to govern their lives. I wish you gentlemen to understand that, like Naya said, it is not the lack of knowing or because we're ignorant. It's because we wish to be kept in ignorance. Thank you very much.
Yes.
I just wanted to comment on one thing that the caller touched on. He made reference to the minutes. I'm not going to go touch everything that he would have brought up. It's just that he made mention about the minutes of cabinet, and that I find is very interesting because there was a judgment within recent times where I think the Prime Minister was requested to turn over some information that came out of cabinet. And I was just wondering, I don't know if Mr. Brand knows, but is there a limitation on the time period before minutes from the cabinet could be released to the public? Because I know in Jamaica, they try to move the amount of time. Usually, they had it for, I think it was 30 years, and somebody was saying they wanted to push it until 60 years, that these things remain sealed. And the opposition, of course, was making a fuss that, it means that you're like almost three generations before information can come out as to what would have transpired in cabinet. I was just wondering if Mr. Brand might know how long, or if indeed there's such a period of time. Or if
I'm not aware
I'm
of
not aware of
that.
that
Is a
period
freedom
of
of. I know there's a Freedom of Information Act, but I don't know that there is a period of time when
I don't think that
the
there's a
cabinet
period of time.
minutes would be made public. I don't know.
when,
I think in the United States there is a, you go to the court and you apply. And there's
in
a
Jamaica,
certain
they
period.
definitely have a period
But
of time
is it-
that it cannot be released, and for good reasons too. And I think maybe we should look into it, because Mr. Van may not want to say something in cabinet, because if it comes out, it may negatively affect him maybe for the next election, in time to come. So it is important, I think, because when I read that information, that article about what pertains in, what happens in Jamaica, I thought it was rather interesting, contrasting that to the judgment that would have been made, I think, relative to the case that Dr. Denzel Douglas had brought against Dr. Harris about releasing some cabinet minutes, if there's indeed a period of time that you cannot.
But you take an oath not to publicize when you're sworn in. You take an oath not to reveal anything that occurred
Yes.
in cabinet. Anyway,
Yes,
go ahead with
but,
the debate.
The matter of cabinet and cabinet minutes is that is even a wider matter than whether it's going to affect any individual member of parliament for the next election. I think that the issue with the confidentiality is in cabinet there are some very serious and sensitive matters, individual matters that take the politics out of it for a moment. We have a lot of issues that comes to cabinet that is personal in nature. When I say personal, confidential matters that even if you were to remove the politics or the politician out of the mix, that deals with matters that affect the ordinary man and woman on the street, and even the ordinary man and woman on the street who often make certain requests of cabinet wouldn't want those matters on the street. I mean, there's a lot of business requests, a lot of personal requests, a lot of, and those are things that, I mean, forget about the like I said, about the politics. There's a lot of privacy issues that comes to cabinet, and I don't think that person would want those matters to come to the fore. I guess it's just the nature of things. You said, I don't think that we here in St. Kitts and Nevis have a time.
There's no time, and there's no.
Maybe something we can look at.
It is possible that Jamaica is very progressive, and it's
Yes,
possible that
very progressive.
there is a time limit in Jamaica.
But 60 years is a long time, 60 years, 3 generations. So whatever a person said 60 years ago, he probably already dead, or and it is of no consequence. I'm just saying that lightly. As I was saying about the bead issue, was that, or people probably can pick up things from that company. When I say pick up, purchase at a very, very, very reasonable cost. Usually when companies are leaving, they want to get rid of as much as they can. In terms of weight, the money doesn't weigh much, so therefore they try to offload by selling equipment. And sometimes you get good equipment at steal.
Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good evening, Mr. Herbert. Hello.
Good evening. You're on the air.
Good evening. I would like to say a few words to Mr. Brand. Is he listening? Could he hear me?
Yes.
Hello.
You're on the air. Could you go ahead?
Yes, Mr. Brand, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Brand. Hello.
Yes. Good evening.
Caller.
Hearing-
Hello.
No, caller. Hello. Hello. Who was it? Go ahead, Mr. Stanley.
Well, fortunately, I am getting what I want out of the British election, British thing, in terms of this Brexit. The Brexit has been put on the back burner, and this tells you that something was wrong with it from the very word go. And in that regard, it's been postponed, and there would be another election. And I hope the people wise up and do the right thing with reference to keeping Britain in the European Union, strengthening the West and the alliances, and also stick something in Trump's eyes, because this fellow Boris Johnson and Trump are almost two of the same kind. They want to come up with these new ideas, and these ideas are, in my view, politically, economically,
Stanley, the deal has been accepted. You're not aware of that?
I am aware of that. At the same time, if the election is...
Just let me get a quick break. I'll be right back.
From Queen City, Nevis, this is the powerhouse of the Eastern Caribbean, Vaughn Radio.
Builders Paradise is offering a large variety of floor and wall tiles at very competitive prices. We've got over 2 million pieces in stock, lots of different styles to choose from. Whether you're renovating or tiling a new house, Builders Paradise has what you need. Oh, and remember, we're open all day Saturday to serve you better. Call them today at 466-4938.
Back on this episode of Thought That Get Results with Dr. Patricia Bartlett, Conrad Nye-Leiber, Ted Hobson, Edric W. Stanley, and the Honorable Spencer Brand. And Nye, I think we were with you.
Yeah, I wanted to remind Mr. Stanley that the deal has been accepted. The UK would leave the European Union. Yes, more time has been given, and probably...
No, it hasn't. It hasn't.
January 31st?
No. There's an election on the 12th.
Yeah, but more time has been given, but there would be an election.
The deal has not been accepted.
The deal has been accepted by Parliament.
No.
What may happen going forward if the government change, then amendments to the deal might put it back on the table. But the deal, as it's been given, settled with Bowens, with Johnson, has been accepted.
It's still subject to a number of amendments, which is quite clear that those amendments are coming and would not be accepted. So it really is just a way of moving the matter forward, but there's still amendments which the Labour Party and the Scottish Nationals are hoping to introduce, which will nullify that general acceptance. So it's not really acceptance.
Okay, let me just take this. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello?
Yes, you're on the air. Could you go ahead?
Yes, I want to say something to Mr. Brand.
Go ahead and speak.
Mr. Brand, some time ago, over a closer year now, you made a promise to a lady concerning some land that was taken off her property to develop a road. You promised you'll come by and talk to the lady. Over a year, I have written letters, no answer, but my plan is up to the end of the year, and I don't get any reply, I'm going to fence my land back off and then let you all take me to court, because that is where I want to reach.
Over a year, you said?
I can't afford a lawyer, so I want you all to take me. I'm going to buy some blocks and fence my property back in, and then you all take me to court. I have written, I have called, no reply.
You wrote letters to who?
Thank you all. Good night.
Hello.
Yes, yes.
Who you have written your letters to?
You, Mr. Brand, a letter was written to you.
You sure you sent a letter to me?
Yes, one was written to Troy Liebert. One was written to
Okay, why don't we do this?
Others.
Why don't we do this? Mr. Brand, can you direct her how she can get in touch with you?
Well, she can call
Mr.
me.
Brand came to see me already.
She said
And he
you
promised he'll come back, and he hasn't gotten back to me neither by phone nor in person.
You can call me 662-8130. Hello.
Hello?
Hello?
Yes, Mr. Brand says that you can give him a call tomorrow.
I do not have a number for him.
662-8130.
662
8130.
8130. Oh, okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay.
Yes, as I was saying, that based on the fact that an election is looming in Britain, that, of course, is a big issue. It's a big dynamic. And once that election is held, I hope Boris Johnson doesn't get back in there. And it thus gives the incoming government an opportunity to make changes, and I hope they will eventually get some wisdom and make the right decision with reference to keeping Britain in the European Union, keep the West more solid together, as the case might be, and ultimately take on the East. We just caught one big terrorist there, al-Baghdadi, and we got a few more to catch. I don't understand how these guys can just go there and kill people willy-nilly. Life is so sweet.
Well, how do we move from Brexit to Baghdadi?
I'm just saying to you, the East, Russia, Persia, or Iran, Syria, you look at what's happening, and people have already said that the East will defeat the West. Well, maybe biblically speaking, they're correct. But in reality, I am a Western man, Western person. I believe in the West, and I think we all should rally around the West to be able to continue the way we have our lives, our way of life, to preserve our way of life, and as a result, I am always rallying and hurrahing for the West. We want to get rid of Trump. Trump, for some reason, is a Western man, but he is supporting those in the East. I don't understand how he doesn't get it, but I hope that with the impeachment process, ultimately, he will resign rather than putting the country through this dilemma.
Okay, let me just take this. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Yes, Mr. Herbert, let's say, some elections ago, one of the statements was made by the present premier was, how much more with NRP as a party? I see the opposition then was taking NRP to court a lot. But now I'm noticing that this government has been going to court a lot. So I would like to ask the premier, how much more would CCM as a party cost us as a country?
You would like to ask the Premier that?
Well, this is going out to him. I'm not going to call, because when I call this show now, the phone is hanging up.
No.
I stop calling.
Yeah, but I'm asking you if you'd like to ask the Premier a question.
No, well, I'm sending it over the airwaves.
Well, yeah, but he is here tomorrow night. Same number, same station.
Oh, Mr. Herbert, tonight I'm available.
Oh, you won't be available tomorrow.
No, I live one day at a time.
I got you.
I cannot speak for tomorrow.
I got you.
Thank you very much.
All right, okay. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good evening, Weber.
Yes.
Just a statement. It is a good feeling rising daily without seeing the crime breaking news out of St. Kitts and Nevis. And I think we should keep praying that the course continues and the crime keeps down as it is presently, and going forward, it stays that way. That's all. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good evening, Mr. Weber. How are you doing?
I'm good, and you?
I'm doing wonderful. Listening to the show. See, you were speaking about me.
Did I speak the truth?
Yeah, you did. You did.
Okay.
Well, I listened to very, very interesting program. Very interesting topic. And you know, you said something tonight, and the guy calling earlier said something concerning, and the lady to do with the court and spending the money. And as I said, I'm in the same situation. Now, how would I take the government to court? But the government using my money to challenge me in the court. And as the guy said, for foolishness. Because remember, I tell you, we were talking about, a while ago we were talking about honesty and dishonesty. Right? And you like to see the facts. So how can people just take it on themselves and call a citizen a risk? How, I mean, and then as the lady said, where can find the money from to go to the court with this situation? You know, I understand what you said a while ago. I remember listening to you talk about you want to see the document. So they didn't get it. Ordinary people have to have the genuine document. But the politician could just write up a document and add your name to it because they're in charge. And the ordinary citizen like me have to find money to go to the court to defend my name when they're using my money. You understand where we're heading, Mr. Weber? And I could recall while I'm here, the motion of no confidence was crushed. It was bantered. It shouldn't take so long, and it should come with immediate effect and the whole 9 yards. But Mr. Weber, how much reach now did Mark Brantley said live on this radio station that he already handed over the documents to Timothy concerning the airport breach. So how long is it going to take? The same time as the motion of no confidence? Where's the people in this? Where's our right to have the document? And I was listening to the lady earlier. Remember, a court tell the Prime Minister to hand over some documents. The courthouse, up until today, the document has not been handed over. Again, the people are suffering. The people, Mr. Weber. And I'm saying to you guys, if Labour get in power, I will not be accepting the foolishness.
You think the foolishness will happen, though?
Hello?
You will not be accepting the foolishness, but you think the foolishness...
The politician, period.
No, work with me.
Mm-hmm.
You said if Labour gets in power, you will not accept this foolishness.
No.
Okay, so I'm asking you, do you think the foolishness will happen anyway?
Well, let's hope it don't happen.
Okay.
Because I be vigorously challenging it, because I have children, not about me anymore, Mr. Weber. I have children in the community who they need to see a better thinking and a better Nevis. And I'm calling on with people. We need now to start to act as a people. Forget politics. There's time when we're going to deal with the politics, Mr. Weber. But I see people, Mr. Weber. When I come to Nevis, I see people. When I go to England, I see people from Nevis. If we're going on these people, the string man in England is Nevis people. I make sure go out the way to make sure that they're happy.
Okay.
People. So we need to start to act as people.
All
the
right.
politician going and the politician come.
Okay.
We as a people going to be here forever.
Okay,
Whenever God comes.
I
You
got
guys
you.
have a lovely night.
Now, before you go, full disclosure.
Yes, my friend.
We told the listeners that you were invited to come 2 weeks ago. Remember that?
Yes, yes.
So, full disclosure, let them know that I kept up my end of the bargain.
Yeah,
right?
you did. But you remember there's certain circumstances beyond my control. I already explained. So
Yeah, but I'm saying you let them know that I kept my end of the
yeah,
bargain.
you did. Don't worry. One day I definitely will join the group. You know, because as I say, I would like to meet everybody there, and you know, even if they're gonna have a laugh. I'm a people person. I love people.
Yeah.
So don't mind. I'm just passionate about ask everybody about which sport.
Right. Right. But just full disclosure, I just wanted them to know that I kept my part.
Yes.
Yeah,
And I
okay.
appreciate it so much, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
All right. Okay. Have
You
a
guys
good
have a lovely
evening.
night. Yes,
Thank
you
you. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Hi, good evening. I listened to the lady that just called about the problem she has with her land being, taken off to accommodate the widening of the road. And it seems to me that you guys brushing her off and discussing Brexit. How relevant is Brexit to us? I mean, this woman has a real problem because this is not the first time she has called in, and somebody really should make an attempt to rectify the situation because other people down the same road, they were fixed up in kings and queens style. And this woman, this poor woman, because she hasn't got anybody to talk for her, you all going on as you are washing her off, and that's not right.
Caller, I could ask you. I could ask you.
And to assist people and so on, and it's not right that you all should brush her off. This is the correct forum to hear her grievance. Listen.
Caller, I could ask you.
You should listen. You got a letter. I know you got a letter.
Caller, I could ask you a question. Caller. You see the thing, caller. Well, I know you would listen anyway. The thing that you will have to understand is this: the lady who called might have called 100 times before. She might have written 100 times before, but it's the first time that she has addressed a problem with me being a part of it. And my approach was, when Mr. Brand volunteered for her to call, I said, Mr. Brand says that you can call her. She says, when? Tomorrow. She said, what is the number? Right? And she took the number. Now, if she calls Mr. Brand, she doesn't get any answer, and then she engages us again, then just like when Dr. Badri didn't engage, that's the way we solve problems. So if she called other people 100 times before, wrote other people, I can't account for it. She calls the show, and we're making an approach so that she can get some, her problem solved. We said, call Mr. Brand, let her call Mr. Brand, let's see what happens.
But if I may, I don't know the lady's voice. I don't know who she is from her voice. It may be that she would have written a letter, but I must say this way about that. One of the things that I find is that there has been quite a number of road expansion projects throughout Nevis for some time. And there is a lot of land issues that still haven't been settled. I am still dealing with land issues from as far back as 15 years ago, right here in the island of Nevis. One of them, without giving any disclosure, is might end up in court. And those are the kind of challenges that I am faced with on a day-to-day basis. Not that I am dismissing the lady. I don't recall, I don't know her from her voice. I asked her to call me tomorrow, and I hope that she would so that we can settle the matter. But I just wanted to say that there is a lot of land issues that the government, I have to be dealing with, because over the years the government would have done quite a number of road construction throughout the length and breadth of Nevis. And persons would have been given letter about they would be compensated for the land, and some persons would have just let it slide. Some person continue to write, some person continue to agitate to have their matter settled. But it is not that I'm dismissing the lady, and I really hope that she will call me tomorrow so we can have the matter settled.
Well, it's quite. I mean, this is. I think it's a good place for us to start, and I think I want to hold you to it that you're gonna look after the lady. You've been an honourable guy so far, and I hope you will continue. Well, I expect you to continue in that vein. Of course, you're gonna inherit a lot of stuff because government is continuous, and so with time, but I would have made the point earlier. And you have to be careful. We have to prioritize. We're in a period of time where scarce resources. We have to prioritize, but those things that have been in the pipeline, especially people have been aggrieved for such a long period of time, because it sounded like she's at that breaking point now. I think you ought to find out who she is, and you need to address it forthwith. Yes.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. But okay. I wanted to introduce something different though, but I don't know if we have enough time, and I don't want to be accused of running out of time.
Become an expert at that.
but I'm never that type of person though. I usually deliver, whatever it is, and we're done with it. I'm not one to go on. No, I don't ever do that. Maybe I might have got the last talk, but I may never try to run on the clock.
Okay, Dr. Bartlett, let me just take this. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Yes, Mr. Hubbard, dear Mr. Brand just did it. That is information that was discussed in cabinet, but it's public information. You see what it took to get that information? This is what I've been saying all along. This information are available to the public.
What's
These are
that?
public servants.
Okay, good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good evening, Mr. Herbert. Mr. Brand knows the lady, because he came to visit the lady because he heard about the situation almost a year now. He came with Mr. Eric Evelyn, right to the lady home, and he was shown all around this property, what was taken off, and the way that she was treated. So he knows
Okay,
about the
caller, let's do this. Let's do this, right? The lady, Mr. Brand, says to call him tomorrow. Let us do that. Let her do that, and then we can follow up from there, right? Let's not rehash something that happened 10, 15 days ago, 15 years ago. Mr. Brand says to call him tomorrow. Let her do that, and let's move from there, okay?
Okay, Mr. Herbert.
All right.
Yeah, well, I wanted to reintroduce a topic that we would have just brushed on slightly a couple of weeks ago, and it was related to the overseas voter. I know that something came up in Parliament, and I'm not so sure how far it got. I don't know if anyone might have had a status report on that. I'm not sure. So I'm kind of concerned because we're going into a next election, and I just want to know where we stand as it relates to that. So I don't know if Mr. Brand maybe or Mr. Hobson might know how far we are with that, if we're likely to get a resolution on it.
I
or
think it
anything.
was just the first reading.
So far, it's only the first reading. It is given an opportunity for people to discuss, I think. People have had a lot of discussions, and they have the pros and the cons and all of that. And it is left to the government to make up its mind what he wants to do, because it's a very serious matter. It is going to call on the government to bar certain people from taking part in the election because they're not resident here. And whether we decide because somebody's a citizen that person has a right, no matter where that person resides, to vote, I don't think, I think in most countries the qualification for voting is residency, because quite often representation is a local matter. And so you ought to be able to vote, you ought to, for someone, that person must have a right that you're voting for to deal with local matters and local people. If you live in the United States or in England or Japan or wherever it is, and you come in for a day and you vote and you go back, questions are going to be asked, and question has been asked, and in some of the islands in the territories in the Caribbean, they have stopped that. In fact, they have never allowed it. Antigua, I think, has a 3 months, I don't know, 3 or 4 months residency. Most of them have. Barbados, I think, has something like that as well. But you know, you have arguments on both sides. People who feel that our brothers and sisters have sent money back home to build up these islands, and why bar them from being able to vote? You know, so. I am really, I have 2 sons abroad who normally come and vote. But should they be able to do that? I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. I'm torn, really, to be honest, Pat.
Well, the thing is that in as much as we are a society that is not, more or less, say, stagnant, and dynamic, I believe at some point in time, the rights of those people would be protected and maybe guaranteed. Those people who were born here, and as a result, some accommodation might be made, and that accommodation might involve sending them an absentee ballot, which would recognize their right to vote in a country where they were born, and because of birthright, which might have been handed down or enshrined in the Constitution, that right might be extended to the privilege of voting, and even though you may not be physically present to vote, it just might be constitutionally correct for that right to be protected, and consequently a ballot, absentee ballot, might be sent to them. So where do we stand if, because of the dynamism, we are now giving them the opportunity to participate, because they have in fact contributed to the well-being and the growth of the island where they were born. Of course, it's not going to be an issue that sits well with everybody, but I firmly believe that those people should, their rights should be protected. How are you going to do it? It will be left up to, well, the parliamentarians for now, but maybe as we go forward and we come up with constitutional, not amendments, but I'd like to see constitutional reform to the extent where all these issues are addressed. And as a result, people will feel more comfortable. The issues will have been brought to the open, and we will have town hall meetings and participation of the voting public as to which way we go.
But Mr. Hobson, do you know, though, if there is such a thing as something designed for people to participate? Because I'm not hearing anything. Okay, we had the
well, I don't think anything formal has been done to gather information and so forth. Oh my! But the idea was that the delay in the idea was the delay in moving the matter forward was to allow people to discuss the matter and to make representation and so forth. I don't know. There is, as you say, I mean, when I think about it now, I don't know of any forum that has been existed here or abroad to gather what people really feel about it. I understand that there has been some discussions with citizens who are abroad. Whenever the politicians go, the matter is raised and so forth. But I don't think anything formal has been established to gather what the people of the country feel, or what people of the diaspora who are abroad, who normally come home to vote, how they feel about it. I don't really know.
Okay, I just asked because I know that the discussion has been about, and like you said, the politicians are discussing it with people abroad. I don't know that they've been discussing it here. And I don't know if maybe it's about time that we had a open and frank discussion about, the way we're going to deal with this matter. Because I personally don't think that it's a matter that, should just be dealt with, at Parliament level. I think people should have an input. I have not ever discussed it with my representative. I've not, and so he doesn't know how I feel about the issue. And I think that we ought to be doing more about it. I think there ought to be more inclusion, so to speak, because to discuss it abroad with people who would be affected, and I understand that, and then we keep, using these words so loosely about, what are fundamental rights. That is not a fundamental right, by the way. They are privileged rights. Well, the way I read it, and some things, you must qualify for, and I think that probably would fall under the heading of a qualified right. If you,
I think all over the world you have to register to vote. I mean,
right,
qualify to vote.
Of course, and so I'm waiting anxiously for us to have that discussion, and after the discussion, I'm like, how are we going to wait? How are we going to decide now? Which voice, is the one that would be informing, Parliament. Are we going to have a referendum? Are we going to have a poll? Even a simple poll, I think, could work. I mean, and I'm not hearing enough about it. And it is too interesting and divisive, and an issue for us to just let hang. And I don't think it should be done just based on the the self-interest of politicians. I don't like to say things like that.
I think politicians always work for their self-interest.
But it's not fair. It's not fair to us as a country.
Yeah,
you can't just
go
and institute something because it would affect you one way or the other.
Yeah.
I think it really should reflect the general feeling of, I'm not suggesting in any way that we'll ever get a consensus on anything around here, because we always have these divisions, depending on who is in power at the time. So, but I think it's an important issue, and I think that we ought to have some public debate on it, and I'm just asking the politicians for them to please start the discussion home. It's well and good to have it in, when you go out, have discussions with the diaspora, but you ought to have the discussion at home as well.
Pat, I think you're absolutely right. That matter has been hanging there for the last, more than 6 months now since the first reading. And it has been hanging there, and you don't have more than 6 months to go before the next election.
But that's why I think it's not meant to go
So
anywhere.
it's still there it's still there, and nobody seemed to be talking about it. One hear all kinds of argument that some members of government are not probably in favor, and others are against, and all that sort of thing. But I think a decision has to be made, and has to be made fairly soon. And it would be great if we had town hall meetings or community meetings, and the matter is discussed, because it's a serious matter. I mean, if you insist on the residency qualification, you are going to disenfranchise a whole load of people. As I said, the last general election we had, it was quite indecent to see thousands of people in the airport there with their suitcase, and you could scarcely move, because many of them came in late and couldn't vote, so they didn't even go into town, so they were all gathered up at the airport there, and a lot of noise, and the place was in a mess. And I think that should not happen again. But a decision has to be made fairly soon, because you don't have more than 6 months to go before the next election, and 6 months is a fairly short time.
I find it's too late. Just like what went on in the last election, when the Privy Council had to step in on that matter, that was a motion move far too late, too close to the election. Mm-hmm. It's going to bring on confusion. I hope this is not another, what we refer to as election language, like We hear about corruption. We hear about now the voters home and abroad. We will also hear about
boundaries.
That is, and we might also
that too has not been settled.
Have not been settled. And we might hear about politicians exposing their what's that one? Their assets. But it's too late. It's simply too late. Yeah. To me, nothing can be done in that respect and breed a sense of fairness between now and the election. And that's why I think it's not meant to go anywhere. At least not in this term, for sure. And to me, it can. You know, this can end up in court because anything that leads to confusion as it relates to voting and voting rights and so forth, it's undemocratic, it's not acceptable. I think the ultimate is for people to have that rights and very secure and protected right to vote, and anything that gets between that, like this thing, because it's too late. It's just too late. I'm sorry. It's highly sensitive. It's highly important. It's something that we must look at to ensure the proper running of our democracy. But it's too late. It's too late. So I for one, would opt to leave it alone and move on and to attack these things in the new dispensation as quick as possible. Could you imagine we're still dealing with boundary change? Of course, that's very fundamental too.
Okay, now I'll come back to you. Let me just...
And the whole demographics
let me just take this.
Elections.
Good evening.
And we were there.
Thank you for holding.
Just at the elections last year, and the Privy Council said something, and nobody have... You know, so it looks like somebody's playing game up in that little point of the pyramid. You know, the politicians come forward. Be truthful to yourself and to the democratic process and to your people. The people have an expectation. When you have these issues so heightened, and you have a big say about them before you got into power, you get into power, and nothing at all. So whoever tabled that motion 6 months ago, that probably wasn't too late. But today it's too late. It's too late to obfuscate the voters.
We should have already gotten into constitutional reform. Because with the boundary changes, if it decides to be implemented, they're going to carve out Gingerland, bringing Gingerland all the way down into St. John. Therefore, we have to look at this very comprehensively, and we have to go back to the Constitution and allow the Constitution to give us the directive. And what I mean by that is that we have the participation of the people, putting into the Constitution certain
Edric, let me just take this. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Prevent.
Weber, good evening to you and your panel. I just wanted to make a brief contribution to your program tonight and speak very quickly just to 2 points. One, the Minister Brand spoke to the issue of land acquisition. That over the years there have been quite a lot of, I guess, land acquisition to do related to a number of projects on Ireland, and he's still dealing with matters that stretch back 14, 15 years. I believe one of the points that should be made and emphasized is this. We have situations on Nevis where that proof of ownership of land at times could be very tricky. To the best of my knowledge, land is owned via two means, either by deed or COT. And from experience, that was a problem. You find that government would have embarked on certain projects and had the need to utilize lands, and at the end of the day, government simply cannot establish who is the rightful owner of that bit of land. And to the best of my knowledge, you cannot compensate someone for land unless you're absolutely sure that they are the owner of the land. And so I suspect that many of the outstanding matters, and Minister Brand can speak to this if he so wishes, that has to do with who really owns the land. And unless that can be established, it is always going to be a problem, and that problem can extend for many a year. And I suspect that the Ministry of Works may be facing such a problem. I just wanted to make that point about land ownership. The second point I wanted to speak to has to do with Dr. Bartlett spoke to the issue of minutes of cabinet, and there seemed to be some suggestion that the minutes of cabinet sessions should be made public after a while. But I think we have to be careful on that, in that even the Constitution speaks to the deliberations of cabinet, and specifically it speaks about the oath of secrecy. And as a matter of fact, section 60 of our Constitution stipulates that any minister, taking up his office, must firstly take that oath of secrecy. And to me, that suggests, or the only conclusion that one can draw from that is that at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is the conclusion, or the decision rather, of cabinet. I am quite satisfied. It's just my personal opinion that what matters is what is the final decision of cabinet with respect to matters that are discussed within cabinet. How any given minister articulates his position or expound on his view, to me is not important. That's internal, that's secret as per the Constitution. And so at the end of the day, to me, the only thing that matters for the public, or to the public, should be the final decision of cabinet on any given issue that's deliberated in cabinet. I just wanted to comment on those two issues. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Just to follow up, or to make a comment on the first point that he addressed, and that is why it is so important that when the way you go about dealing with a problem or issue, because here it is the caller who is knowledgeable of those areas, and it's very awkward for me sometimes to listen to somebody giving an explanation of a matter which has a lot of history and information in it, and you take a phone call and then you want to address it, you don't get the other sides, etc., etc., and that's what happened 2-3 weeks ago. And that is why I said, why don't we then talk to Mr. Brand, and then if you don't get any satisfaction, and be prepared to again defend what your position is. You see what I'm saying? So sometimes there are issues that you might even get a chance to ask the person, and bring it out and expose. Sometimes when you begin to ask them, they hang up. For instance, a lot of people would call and they would ask questions of the Premier. Well, we have a government minister here, which is good. So sometimes we pass it on to Mr. Brand. But everybody knows. It's not trying to praise him up or anything. Everybody knows the Premier is, first of all, he is courageous and he is articulate. And when I invite people to call him and ask him, I'm genuine with it. If you want it, ask him. And he invites your questions, if you really would like the part. But somehow people, they don't want to ask him. They prefer to ask somebody like me who don't know the answer. I don't know why. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Good night, Mr. Weber.
Yes.
And good night to your panel of your program tonight. And good night to the people of Nevis and to the wider section of the media house. Now, I would like to say, within listening what you all are stating on tonight, I didn't hear it from the beginning, but from when I catch on from the later pattern before that last caller. I would like to say, within the system, Mr. Webber and all who dear, if we, as a people who say, I don't vote it by bringing from experience I see how the voting have indicated for our people when it comes to representation and the way we vote is supposed to be fully attuned to when it comes to these people we call as our candidates and our people who are gone into the legislative body active. Now, if we say we're putting them there to represent us, the first thing of other business cannot be you're going to show allegiance to a woman who have had our people in a disarray state of mind. And today we're still holding up that same image as a model for us to say is just a prestige of honoring. That is disrespectful to our people. And up to now, that constitution didn't give us as a people the voice we really desire to be heard when it comes to the representation of the candidacy that we see are briding for political office, whether they are male or female. We are failing the emphasis of how we're going to try to build better information out to the people and not hiding it because we want to have some kind of secrecy, as the last caller indicates, that there's a steer onto. That is total disregarding the trust of the people, and the people that may stay blindsided. We need to wake up and align ourselves with these politicians and let them know whether we vote or we don't vote. We need to have good collaboration around our society so we people just don't have aware that we're just doing things to say we want a representation and that's all we're counting for. We need the voice to be agitated properly and respectfully so we people can have equal rights and justice around the table. And nobody's trying to commonize no one because they say they name minister or they name doctor and them other things. It's time for our people to have social equality. Give thanks, Mr. Webber.
All right, thank you very much.
Webber,
good evening. Thank you for holding. I'm going to come to you, Mr. Byrne.
Hi, good evening. One of the things that the last caller didn't mention is that there are laws when it comes to the acquisition of private land. And if I am correct, I hope myself to, being corrected, that it follows a format. Government is supposed to meet with the owner, and you don't tell me that there are lands who people don't know, you don't know who the owner is, because government shouldn't really be entering on land when they don't know the owner. I mean, I remember there's a woman, Christine Allen Toppin or something, she did a study on land tenure in the Eastern Caribbean and so on. And there are regulations that governs the acquisition of land for public purposes. And what is happening is that the government is not paying heed to those procedures. And I think that's where the problem lies. Good night.
Good evening. I think I will still go to Mr. Brand.
Yes, yes, but the caller spoke about.
I'm sorry about that, Mr. Brand. Let's go again.
Yes, the caller.
Is it better now?
2 or 3 callers ago, the caller indicated that there were some issues with land ownership. We do have some of those challenges. And the last caller is absolutely correct that there is indeed a process that the government ought to follow in not only land acquisition but any property as it regards to acquisition. And one of the important and critical component of that is that the person who the property is being acquired from, the matter should be settled at fair market value. And I think at times that is where the difference of opinion comes in, because there ought to be some valuation done, and it must be at a satisfaction to the property owner. So sometimes those things can take some time, but she's absolutely correct. There is a process. Not all the time the process is fully followed. Some of those would have ended up in the court. And 2 or 3 callers ago indicated, yes, there is some acquisition where the ownership of the property is, is in question. Absolutely.
Well, I would really like to thank the caller who would have called, because that, I sat here and I was listening to the discussion about the land and, who would have been, not feeling treated or thought they wouldn't. But after, the caller, it was good information, and I welcome that kind of intervention. And he went on also to speak about the matter about the oath and secrecy. And I do understand that, and I think it was more of a question of some people wanting to know, and I think some people actually want to have the minutes of what goes on, And I'm like, okay, in a different jurisdiction, maybe it is released, but it would really be released many moons after, the actual, conversation would have happened. And I was just seeking clarification as to, if we had a time on that, which I don't think,
we don't have it here. But I would certainly not be surprised to hear that it exists in Jamaica, because they're very progressive. And I mean, 60 years is, people would have gone, so it doesn't matter.
Well, it may be less than that, actually. That in my memory might not be as accurate as,
But I'll look into it, though.
But you see, one of the things I think happens, though, I believe, where we have these difficulties, is that traditionally and generally speaking, we are more of a closed society. They have other societies, Ted said, like Jamaica and America and so on, where the people themselves are more open. But in our societies, we're more closed in terms of information and stuff like that, and keeping. But the point is, it should not be, but that's how it is.
Yeah, but we have to change that. We have to agitate to change things like that. I'm not saying that I need to know, exactly what happens.
Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Hey, good evening, Weber and the team here tonight. Carl Brown here from Fountain and St. Kitts. Gentlemen and ladies, one of the things we need to be looking at, right? It's absolutely, it's absolutely too late for the people from overseas to, as people are saying, disenfranchise them. But here, you guys, it is not disenfranchise, What we are requesting and what we are looking for is a constituency living area. That is all the thing saying. You cannot live overseas and want to be voting here and saying you live in a constituency here. It can't happen. You can't live two places. And what we are saying is that when you look around the Caribbean, all of these islands are done in a way with this overseas vote. I mean, everybody, voters, politicians, intended politicians, agreed that they want to done with it. But when one side is making a step to do done with it, some side is saying it's disenfranchised. You can't disenfranchise.
Caller, we don't have a lot of time. Let me ask you quickly. How would you respond to Dr. Badley's argument then, and take it out totally out of the politician, and also, they can be involved, but include the masses, the people?
Well, that we could try that.
So what's wrong with that?
Eh?
What's wrong with her view?
Nothing is wrong with her view.
Okay.
I'm saying, yes, we can try that.
Yes, but...
Right? But here, who is going to be the party that... the party that overlook, not a political party, an independent party process that I love to overlook and see the guidance and follow the laws and the constitution of getting rid of this.
Okay, I got you. Let me finally take this call. Good evening, you got a half a minute.
Hello, Mr. Herbert.
You have a half a minute. Go ahead.
Yes, this is from Mr. Hobson. If the present Boundaries Commission, which has not met yet, does not complete its work, in his opinion, which boundaries will be used for the election?
Well, that I don't know. I know that there is a Boundaries Commission that is actually sitting at the present time, and the 2 years from the last commission report is more than. I mean, they're able after 2 years to have a new report. So I suspect that may happen in the next couple of months.
But the question, Hobson, if they don't complete, which boundaries you think will be used for the next election? Because you said you suspect they'll complete in the next couple of months, right?
Yeah, but the matter is still before the court.
Right, but what if you said there's a current Boundaries Commission sitting?
Yeah.
Okay. They're doing their work.
The new one.
The new one, yes. They're doing some work. Right? For the past 2 years, you said?
Well, 2 years have passed since the last report.
Right. Now, so the question is, if they don't complete their work before the next election, which boundaries you think will be used for the next election? Let's say the next election is called within a month.
That's a matter for the court.
The court?
Yeah, because the matter is before the court. The matter was never settled. The matter, after the matter went to court, to the Privy Council, the matter was not settled. All the Privy Council decided it was too late, and so therefore you have to use the old boundary. But the report that was submitted to Parliament has gone to court. The opposition challenged it, and it's still before the court. It has not been determined yet.
So the political pundits were right, it seems then, when they told me, if you think that you saw confusion last time, put on your seatbelt. That's the last word. Teddy, was good to have you back. This program repeats tomorrow at 10 o'clock following the VON News Minute. Join the Honorable Mark Brantley tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock for On the Mark. Thank you all again for joining us. This is your voice in the community. You all have a wonderful evening.